We're back again. It's another edition of the Smart Driving Cars podcast. This edition is sponsored by the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. For more information, head to motoetf.com. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alain Kornhauser. Good morning, Alain.
Hey, good morning, Fred.
And we are happy to have with us the Innovation Editor at the Financial Times and founder of Sifted.eu, focusing on startups, John Thornhill. Thanks for taking the time, John.
You're very welcome. Glad to join you.
John, nice to have you.
Well, John, you recently authored an opinion piece at the Financial Times headlined, "Sociology, Not Technology, Will Decide the Electric Car Race." You've got a quote from Alan in there, so of course it's a great piece. Give us the overview of what you focused on here. You start out with really a look at the history of the automotive industry.
So I was fascinated by the origins of the US auto industry and did a lot of reading about how in the late 1890s and the early 1900s, there were hundreds of car companies were formed across America, this amazing kind of burst of innovation and experimentation. And then the industry consolidated down to basically three players in the 1950s. And I thought something similar was happening again today. There's a whole new wave of companies being created in the auto industry, particularly in the EV sector. A lot of money going in, a lot of venture capital money going in, either directly or via the SPACs. And this amazing battle really between the traditional car makers and a lot of EV startups. Tesla obviously has been the longest established and most successful of them. Its market value is now enormous, bigger than kind of Ford, GM, Toyota and Volkswagen combined. But you're seeing other EV companies as well emerging. And I just think that's a fascinating phenomenon.
The comparison is very interesting between what's going on today and the origins of the automotive industry, when there were, I think, some attempts at electric vehicles as well, right?
Indeed. I mean, Alan knows more about this than I do, but I mean, there clearly was a kind of battle as to which system was going to work, and the combustion engine eventually prevailed. But there were people experimenting with other forms of technology at that time, for sure.
Right, as I like to say, if we were sitting, in 1910, 110 years ago or so, and looking at the industry, we would probably be doing a podcast saying, "My goodness, what do we have here? We have steam, we have electricity, and we have this internal thingy," and they were out there. I don't know if we could have picked a winner out of that at that particular point in time. Of course, the steam had the history that it was sort of the smokestack industry of the time. Electricity, people had been certainly trying it. And if you look at the electric traction, the electric trolley industry, it was the same way. People were trying various experimentation. As I like to say, this is what the AV community looks like in some sense with respect to driverless. Nobody's really doing it anywhere. In the 1880s, there were a lot of folks trying stuff. I mean, it probably is exactly the same thing, and somehow something emerged and it worked, and boom, all of a sudden it's everywhere. Right, John? Jump in.
I think the other interesting comparison is that the people who develop cars clearly think it's all about the technology. They want to produce the best car they possibly can. And I think the point you were making, Alan, when we spoke last, was that it's also about the kind of sociology. It's about how people adopt cars, the infrastructure that surrounds them, how the cars are marketed and sold and promoted. And it's all of the kind of soft side of the auto industry, which I think is really important. And clearly that's vitally important on the EV sector, where you've got to have a whole new infrastructure being built to support the EV sector. And as someone who's recently kind of bought an EV car, I can tell you range anxiety is a real thing. You've really got to kind of plot where you're going, where you're going to stop to recharge and so on. And so it becomes a far bigger logistical exercise.
Right. It really is a sociology. I wish we wouldn't call it soft versus hard, because somehow it implies that this is unimportant. In the end, those two words should be probably flipped, because in fact, the technology is in some sense straightforward. Okay. The sociology, the people, the mindsets, the what you have to do, the madmen that you have to put together that promote this, that sell this, that end up so that people go and take money out of their pockets and do it, or even elect people in politics to 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 do it. I mean, that is non-trivial, and this is you can't really get your hands, or it goes through your fingers.
And I think when new technologies come in, there clearly is a process of adaptation, isn't there? I mean, I was reminded in this country that when the first automobiles hit the road, they were preceded by people waving red flags to warn pedestrians to get out the way, and that survived quite a long time. I think there is always a process of adaptation and legislative change. The insurance industry has to change, and the whole infrastructure has to develop.
Absolutely. And I don't know whether or not you've found in there to what extent in your research, to what extent those that were making the horse and buggy carriages were among the players or not among the players, or were they the new Henry Fords out there creating from pure ground, new industries. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you get all kinds of people coming into an industry. You get the established players who are trying to kind of reinvent what they're doing and to grab market share in a new market. You've got kind of wild-eyed pioneers who have this great technological breakthrough that they're obsessed with trying to develop. And you've got designers, you've got amateurs, you've got cranks, you've got all kinds of people piling into an industry, which makes it so interesting to write about at the moment.
Right, and it's really exactly what's going on. Silicon Valley isn't new, or what the Chinese are doing, in terms of pumping this up. Well, maybe it's new, maybe because it's coming out of, I don't know. Talk to me here, John.
I mean, I think what's fascinating as well is that there's clearly a kind of speculative boom in the kind of EV market in particular. You are getting a lot of companies being brought to market via SPACs and just invested in by the other car companies as well. I haven't done this, but maybe I should do it a bit more systematically. But when you look at the business plans of all of these companies and you add up all the market shares that they're projected to achieve, I can tell you that it comes to a hell of a lot more than 100%. So there clearly is going to be a lot of blood on the carpet. I mean, a lot of these companies are going to go bust, as they did in the kind of 1910s and 1920s and 1930s. It will be fascinating to see who emerges as winners from this process.
I guess you could expect to see more mergers along the way too.
Yeah, I think there will be a whole wave of consolidation. I think, I mean, as we're already seeing, some of the big car makers are kind of buying into this sector, both on the EV side and the AV side, are trying to develop their expertise. And I think there's a bit of a battle going on. As one kind of analyst put it to me, there's a struggle between the hardware companies, as it were, the traditional car makers who are trying to understand and get software to work, and the software companies, the new entrants like the Googles and so on, who are trying to get the hardware to work. And it's an open question, I think, as to which of those two sectors wins. But I think we're going to see all kinds of kind of cross pollination between the two sides of this. I mean, as Alan, we were talking about the other day, I mean, in a sense, cars used to be kind of tin boxes, but they're now becoming computers on wheels. And the software component of a car is becoming increasingly important. And it will be interesting to see to what extent that is the differentiating factor in terms of who buys a car in the future.
Yeah, I think that was the interesting part, the question that you raised with respect to, who's going to be, if there is a winner that pulls the whole thing out of there, is it going to be the software folks or is it going to be the hardware folks? And of course it depends on a little bit on who you talk with, because certainly the hardware folks come and tell you that hardware, even though you might look at it as being trivial, these cars have to be painted. Okay, and so you need to be able to do the painting well. There are things like that. Of course, the tires have to work, the wheels have to not fall off, and those kinds of fundamental things, which then suggest, hey, you better not take the hardware too lightly on this thing. And if we look at the computer industry, take it to PC or whatever, which one you want, there's always been sort of the hardware folks out there, and thank goodness for Moore's law that's gone in there and done some really great things out of that. But then again, what did Steve Jobs really do? I mean, what you see is what you got. I mean, that made such an enormous difference. I used to, my dissertation was 2 boxes of cards. I drop a box of cards, holy hell, I got to start over. The fundamental difference of what the software did, but working with it, I don't know which one we might say is winning that race right now.
Yeah.
John?
And you're definitely seeing that with, Tesla. You and Elon Musk is, I think, talked very kind of powerfully about this, that trying to scale up a brilliant kind of prototype car into a mass-produced product is a fantastically difficult thing to do, and to make sure that every car that comes off the production line is up to standard, is not going to fail, is going to enhance the quality of your brand. That's a really tough game, as all the traditional car makers know very well. That's not an easy business at all. I tend to think, though, that the car makers also face an enormous challenge on the software side, because it's traditionally been something they've tended to outsource. They have kind of looked to partner with outside partners. It's not a kind of core competence that many of them have. And it'd be interesting to see whether they feel as though they need to develop that kind of software side, or whether they think they can still carry on kind of outsourcing it to other people if it becomes an increasingly critical component of their service that they are offering. So people, as you know, talk about mobility as a service. That's the way that we're heading. And if you get into the kind of service business rather than the product business, then that seems to me to argue that the software is more likely to win.
Yeah, I sort of agree with you on that one, that the software is really critical, because what one's doing with that is you're saying that the software is really the thing that's going to manage and make this thing just sing and work, and you aren't going to rely on an individual to do it. That's the real advantage of all this. But it has to work. It can fail sort of every once in a while, but it really, the probability of failure has to have a bunch of 0.99s on it. Otherwise, somebody's got to pick up the tab, and the picking up of the tab there is really the tough one.
I'm very intrigued by where the AV revolution is going, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Alan. I think the obviously the kind of end game of all this, according to a lot of the car makers, is to have kind of fully on-demand EVs and AVs, and I think that starts to do really interesting things to transport systems if that ever happens. A couple of years ago, I was in Singapore, and I visited an autonomous driving company there and had a ride in one of their cars.
Too simple, probably, or maybe another one. I don't. Go ahead. Go.
Yeah. And that's obviously a really great experience in its own right. But their modeling was that, I think at that time Singapore had about 900,000 cars on the road, and their projections were that if you could get a fully autonomous EV fleet on the roads of Singapore, you could probably get away with 300,000 cars, which would, in a sense, have a massive benefit to the environment in terms of the number of cars that you produced and needed to run. But it also means that you'd have those cars pretty much rotating permanently on the roads, except when they needed to recharge. And that would change the whole way that transport systems work. You wouldn't own a car, you would just use mobility as a service and use your app to call a car and to take you to Changi Airport whenever you wanted to.
No, I agree with that vision. That's why I work on this every day, is because I've consumed the Kool-Aid and fundamentally believe that there's enormous social value associated in providing mobility, and we don't need to be out there controlling our own cars to be able to go to A and B. I always use the elevator as the analogy. My goodness, if we had to have an elevator operator, chauffeuring us up and down the elevators. I mean, I don't know who could afford an elevator yet. You put a big building, you have the mobility system up and down the building. You can rent out the 14th, the 80th, and so on floors. Why? Because this on-demand 24/7, 365, blah, 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 availability of this thing, it's an absolutely necessary condition. The way we've developed our horizontal living as opposed to our vertical living is that my goodness, everybody's relied upon somebody going out and buying a car, having a car, driving a car, doing it, providing for themselves. I mean, that's a fundamental of the horizontal system that we've dispersed ourselves in. If you can change that, if you can make it on demand like that, cheap to do, who knows what the heck it does. I mean, that.
I had quite a lot of kickback on the article that I wrote from kind of environmental campaigners questioning the whole premise of the kind of EV industry to begin with. I mean, is it really that beneficial to the environment? If you are still producing cars more rapidly, and therefore a lot of these cars are going to go obsolete quite quickly and will have to be replaced. But secondly, the whole argument about whether electricity is produced in a clean way. And clearly, if you're getting electricity from coal-powered fire stations, then that's not really doing anyone any good in environmental terms. So I think all of these things have to go together, don't they? You have to create electricity from sustainable sources in order to get the environmental benefits of moving the fleet towards electrification.
Yeah, of course, that argument exists. Everybody knows that argument exists, that in fact, that you convert something that doesn't use electricity as something uses electricity, it's the marginal electricity. Okay, so where's that going to come from? And what's easy to turn on? A coal power plant. You aren't going to go out there and put more turbines out there or whatever. I mean, all that we don't have enough turbines to turn off all the coal power fired plants already. So they're there because, so yes, but those two things have to work together, and which one leads, which one, that they should work synergistically together, right? I mean,
one of the other interesting trends I'd love to hear your thoughts on, Alan, is as well, is that there are a number of kind of mobility apps and businesses that are developing, whereas Uber will just focus on the kind of car mobility, although they're now kind of diversifying it as well into kind of bikes or scooters or whatever. But more of a kind of integrated app, so that you're in Cologne and you want to get somewhere, that it would recommend whether you should walk or take the metro or a bus or a car or whatever. And I think that's quite an interesting phenomenon that that kind of goes beyond kind of the individual companies who are operating in this area. What do you think about that? I mean, are we going to get a kind of fully integrated mobility as a service concept, do you think, developing, or is it really going to be kind of individual companies who dominate their particular sectors?
To me, those are if you take all the trips today in the U.S., there are on a typical day 1.1, 1.2 billion person trips that use a vehicle, and the people decided not to walk. I mean, I guess they could have walked them all if we didn't have any of this stuff. But, in the decision process of what everybody has available to them, the decision process that the brain goes out pre-pandemic. Okay, we won't. Pandemic's it's got to be over sometime, and then we can move back to what we are used to. But that's a whole other. But pre-pandemic, 1.1, 1.2 billion person trips. Okay, most of them are made by automobile. Okay, maybe 2% in the United States are made by transit. Okay, who knows? Way less than 1% are made by bicycles. And if you did it on a person mile basis, it'd be even smaller. Okay. The number of times that you're moving, that you're in Cologne as opposed to Princeton is like, tail of a distribution. It's, way out. The bulk of the things are the things that we as living objects do on a typical day recurrently, that you go get quart of milk, whatever, to do those kinds of things. Okay. And I think that if we really want to address that and enhance quality of life, we want to enhance the quality of life of what the things we do on a daily basis, improve that a little bit. Find those that don't have the opportunity to do those things because they don't happen to have a car, or at least that's what I would like to argue. Boy, if you don't have a car available out here, right out here to hop in to go whenever you want, 2 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning or whatever, I got to wait for the bus. I got to do one. I got to do. I mean, if one could provide, just like if you're in a tall building and you walk down the hall and an elevator comes by and you get on, you don't even think about it.
Yeah,
I think that's the big one to me, and that's the real enhancement in the sociology, and that sociology is the sociology that I think we need to work on first.
I think the pattern of mobility is clearly changing in a different way in Europe to the US, and so I think when you go to any major kind of European city now, when you're allowed to, that is, whether it's London or Paris or Amsterdam or Stockholm or Berlin, they are visibly different cities now from when they were when I was growing up. The cyclists are everywhere in all of these cities. You have many more people walking. There are far fewer cars. Most of these cities now levy congestion charges, pollution charges on cars to try to deter people from the center. You get a lot more kind of pedestrianized areas, particularly in cities like Paris. So I think that there is a real attempt to try to come up with alternative methods of transport. But as you say, the car for many people is indispensable. And I think it's how we can integrate all of these different methods of transport that's going to be intriguing.
Yeah, I think every time I've gone to England, I've refused to drive because the reason is you do it on the wrong side of the road. Okay, and
the right side of the road.
I think I can do it, but if it comes crunch time, in which I need to react to save my butt, I think I'll do the wrong reaction because my reaction is so trained by the way I drive around here. I'd be afraid to just do the absolutely wrong thing. So I've refused to drive. And okay, so I've been driven, or I just walk, or I just take the underground and whatever, and great, and it has to be. So there are those issues, and of course you go to Paris, and you'd be crazy to rent a car and try to drive. I gave that up. I speak the language, and I gave that up a long time ago. I can't handle that. Where you come here, go to New York, don't even try it in Manhattan, okay, or Brooklyn, maybe Staten Island. I don't know. Anyway.
And it's also going to be interesting in a lot of Asian cities as well, isn't it? Where, particularly in China, where I was talking to an architect the other day who's helping design completely new cities in China, and they are planning for a completely different kind of urban environment, whereby you would have special lanes for autonomous vehicles with all the kind of embedded technology that you need in stop signs and so on in order to accelerate the adoption of that kind of technology. And they have quite consciously reduced the space that is devoted to car parks in these city centres and on the streets as well, figuring that they will need a far fewer vehicles than in a traditional city.
Yep.
We'll be back with more, but first, this is a good time to remind you about our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. To get more info, head to motoetf.com. On the website, check out a white paper. It's called the Smart Transportation Revolution. It's under a tab called Insights and News. Some great information there to help you make informed decisions about investing. ETFs, as you probably know, can be a smart way to spread risk with investments and maybe focus on a particular category of stocks. The website again is motoetf.com. We're back with more smart driving cars and our guest, John Thornhill of the Financial Times. John, so much focus when we talk about EVs has been on Tesla. Do they still have, from your perspective, a big technological edge over the competition?
Speaking to other EV makers, I think there's kind of enormous respect for how Elon Musk has kind of revolutionized the entire sector and still holds, I think, quite a significant lead when compared to most other EV makers. And I think the other extraordinary aspect of Elon Musk is that, as they say, he's the kind of emperor of memes. He has created this enormous kind of buzz around the company. He's made EVs cool, which many people thought was a completely impossible thing to do a few years ago. And so there is a whole kind of culture associated with the Tesla brand and the kind of followership that he has. So I think Tesla is very much a kind of unique company. I think there are others that are coming along which are producing really very interesting EVs. The one I'm fascinated to see what's going to happen with is Lucid. I spoke to kind of Peter Rawlinson, the CEO, recently about how they're developing their Lucid Air, which is going to be on sale later this year, which by the looks of it will be an astonishingly good car with a range of about 517 miles, I think he was suggesting, which would make it very easy to drive from San Francisco to Los Angeles with music blaring out and the air conditioning fully on, which I think it needs to be in that part of the world at the moment. You would have no range anxiety doing a trip like that. And I think that begins really to change the equation as well on EVs, that when you can make really significant journeys without any worries about kind of recharging, that gets you into new territory, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd throw in there, I think Ford and the Ford F-150 EV, maybe more than Musk's whatever pickup truck he's been designing that we all know. It's like, whoa.
The Cybertruck.
The Cybertruck. If in the US, those folks who buy pickups, which is a substantial part of the light-duty vehicle market, because if you actually look at the market in the United States as to light-duty vehicles, it's about 50-50 cars and trucks. Some of them aren't trucks, they're SUVs. Why they're SUVs is because the SUV is built on the truck body, and the truck body had a in the fuel economy standard had a different standard than the car body, and it had a less egregious standard, and so everybody moved everything over to less egregious environmental standard, okay, and went and bought but that's what's happened there. But now, if all of a sudden that market, that mind, not to say that it's good, bad, indifferent mindset, that mindset that buys pickups, people like to haul stuff. I'm sure they don't just haul stuff. And you go into a Ford F-150, you think you're in a limousine, okay? If Ford sells the Ford F-150 EV, wow. Yeah. Talk to me here.
Well, I think you're definitely going to get the pull factor from the consumers, as you're talking about. You're also going to get quite a big push factor, I think, from governments. I mean, particularly in Europe, they're already suggesting that kind of dates when they're going to phase out the combustion engines on the roads. And so I think, countries like Norway, the EV adoption has rocketed largely because of government measures.
Sure.
So I think that's going to be an interesting factor to watch in Europe in particular. I mean, China clearly had a strong lead in EV adoption. And looking at the latest numbers, there's been a kind of fast growth in Europe. And in terms of kind of unit sales now, Europe is really kind of rapidly catching up, and in some countries overtaking China in the kind of rate of growth which it's experiencing. So I think
but that's been on the pricing. I mean, the egregious taxes that are placed on internal combustion engine and the regulated incentives. But as I see the Ford F-150 electric vehicle pickup, that is, purely a market, a market-driven type of thing. And if that means that, to me, that the fundamental sociology has changed. Not, Europe may say, hey, we don't want pickups on there, and they're way too big, and all the other things. I don't know, or maybe I don't know, maybe Ford will bring it over there, and you guys go nuts. I don't know.
One other aspect I think of this, which is kind of intrigues me as well, is the on the question of who's going to make money out of this. Is it the people who are selling in effect, the kind of picks and shovels of this new transport revolution who are going to make the real money, as opposed to the people who are trying to strike gold? And so, I mean, you're getting a lot of money going into the charging infrastructure, in the battery production, and some of the insurance companies that are emerging to kind of figure out new ways of kind of charging insurance or pricing insurance as well. And I think that that's maybe a kind of steadier kind of way of making money, or at least a less volatile way of making money. If you can run the railroad rather than the trains, that might be interesting.
What about the opportunities in creating the clean energy that Alan pointed out needs to come in tandem with it?
For sure. Yeah.
John, let me ask you about this. I mean, as you look at Tesla, Tesla's the car, but Tesla is really more than just the car. I mean, it's sort of part of the brilliance of, I'll call brilliance of Elon. One, he recognized that if I am going to compete in there with building the car, I might as well build a car that has half as many parts as the other guys are building. I mean, that is a fundamental advantage, of an electric vehicle. And then realizing right from the beginning that who might buy these things? Well, it's people that already that this isn't their only car. So of course I'll sell it to the rich folks in California, because essentially everybody has who knows how many cars in California. I'm overstating it, but all of a sudden to sneak in one of these guys in there, and I'll put the charging infrastructure. I'll start doing that thing. And I'll work on the batteries, and I'll work on the generation of the electricity that has to go in there, and the solar cells, and he's almost like Henry Ford, who says, I'm gonna make the steel that has to go into the car, and in fact invest in the petroleum that it's. Talk to me here.
Yeah, I mean it's. I think it's fascinating how a lot of the EV companies, or the new ones anyway, have started at the kind of top end of the market, as you're saying with Tesla, or clearly Lucid is trying to do the similar strategy. They're trying to produce what are very expensive luxury cars to establish the kind of brand in the market, and then almost work down and figure out how they can make these cars cheaper and cheaper to appeal to a bigger mass audience. That's an interesting kind of strategy to adopt, and I guess different from the kind of traditional auto industry, which is based on mass producing cars at far cheaper points. And as you're saying, Alan, I mean, if the kind of Ford can get that right, Volkswagen is making a very big play in Europe on that front, kind of Volvo and so on. And a lot of the Chinese companies are, and in India, we're even seeing some kind of EV companies who are producing very cheap cars now, and they're trying to transform the economics of it. So I think there are different ways of trying to tackle this market, aren't there? You either try to go for a kind of high quality brand and then try to establish that with a kind of pricing premium, or you go for the kind of the mass market product. And these are different economics that apply in both cases.
I think there were more rumblings this week about a $25,000 Tesla coming in the, I don't know how far off, but within a couple of years.
Yeah, I think when you get to those kind of price points, then you do reach a kind of switchover moment, I think, don't you? That at the moment you have all kinds of people who are saving up because they're desperately too associated with a Tesla and the brand. And it is, as Alan's saying, beyond a kind of car company. It's buying into a kind of lifestyle or almost a cult. But once
it's Apple all over again, isn't it?
Indeed, yeah.
But the looming is also, the really mass produced electric vehicle coming out of China that ends up looking like, the scooters or the electric bikes. And I don't know, people might all of a sudden suggest, oh my goodness, we've seen that before in the US. We thought that was the Japanese back in 1960 or something like that, about to flood us with these, rinky-dink, whatever,
Corolla.
Yugos, huh?
The Corollas.
The
The
Corolla
Toyota
or whatever.
Corolla.
And then all of a sudden, the Japanese are making these things that are actually better than the GM vehicles and so on. And then, of course, then it was, game over. But there's this thing looming, isn't there?
It's, amazing in China. I was there a few years ago, and it was the kind of peak of the kind of bike boom, the kind of bike rental boom. And I think there were something approaching 50 or 60 companies that IPO'd in China, all with basically the same business plan. The game was just to raise as much capital to create your networks as fast as you could. And then, of course, a few years later, there was mass destruction of all these surplus bicycles that were just left abandoned on the streets. And it's an amazing kind of model of, you just throw a lot of capital in the market very quickly to see who wins. And then those that do can kind of scale quickly, and those that don't die very fast. That's certainly a very different way from doing it in Europe.
So one question I might like to ask you, if you in your looking, is there a Hindenburg moment in the EV business? We're at the very beginning of it still, okay? And Hindenburg was somewhat at the beginning of this great new way to cross the oceans and travel between cities and ultimate luxury and comfort. And then one afternoon, not far from here, boom, game over.
Yeah,
Okay.
One would like to think the situations are quite different.
I'm sure they are. Yeah, one would like to think. I'm asking the question. Okay, I don't know. I just throw it out there to have some fun.
Yeah, no, I think probably less so than on the EV side, but definitely on the AV side. As we can already see, the minute any kind of semi-autonomous car kills someone, it's front page news around the world. Yeah. And so our kind of risk tolerance for automated decision-making systems that go wrong is really very low. And yet we seem to coexist with human drivers on the road, many of whom are completely crazy and do terrible things.
We can kill each other, but we can't let a computer kill us.
Yeah. So I think, it's quite possible that we'll get some horrendous accident caused by an AV, and that will be a kind of Hindenburg moment. It will kind of set back the industry. And that's definitely something that people who are pushing the autonomous revolution are worried about, and that they are concerned that one of these companies is just going to push too early, too quickly, and that there will be a big public reaction, which will then lead to kind of a far stricter regulation and controls on the industry, and it will set it back a long way. So I think you're right that there is a risk of a very bad accident happening, and then a very bad public reaction. But I can't quite see that happening in the EV market. Can you?
Well, the only thing that could happen in the EV market is these batteries burning is disconcerting a little bit. Cars with gas tanks have been blowing up for 100+ years. Okay, and we've done with it. They closed I-95 a couple of days ago because of a car fire. I hope, I don't know, maybe it was an EV. I didn't look into it, but I'm imagining it wasn't an EV. But when Boeing was trying to put out the Dreamliner aircraft, what was the problem? The batteries were burning.
The other nightmare scenario, I think, for the EV industry would be the fact that it is a connected charging system. And so, as I'm now discovering, to my great delight, that you have to download a lot of different apps for different kind of charging companies in order to kind of charge up your car. And all of them depend on kind of internet connectivity. So it's not impossible to imagine that we have some horrendous kind of cyber attack that takes down networks and
Yeah.
therefore the whole system gets paralyzed really quite quickly. So I think there are vulnerabilities in the system for sure, and I think we will see those over the next few years.
Sort of the
Possibly
other one.
solvable. Elon Musk has an internet connection via satellite too. So,
Yeah, and he's putting up this and whatever. But I think the other thing sort of in the news these days has been sort of the hydrogen economy and fuel cells and so on. And I guess back in the 70s, I dealt with the hydrogen economy and thought it was great, but holy heck, here it is 50 years later and whatever. And we had Apollo 13. What was the problem with the Apollo program? It was the damn fuel cells, and geez, what and hydrogen. And then it brings back the whole Hindenburg thing almost in spades. I mean, I just.
Yeah, it's a bit like Brazil is the country of the future and always will be. A bit like that with
we're
hydrogen.
nasty. We're being nasty here, John.
but one of the things that we're including, Alan, is that Information Trends has a new research study out, market research study saying close to 600,000 hydrogen fuel cell buses and minibuses will be in service by 2035.
Yeah, I think that's what I was referring to. And I'm
Right.
I sort of roll my eyes on that one, like to hear about it, but, and maybe, maybe, I don't know. Again, I think we said that 50 years ago, although I may have said we would have automated driverless vehicles 50 years ago too. So I don't know.
And in some sectors, clearly there has been enormous technological process, and you could have made the same argument about batteries, I guess, a while back, couldn't you? But the kind of costs and the power of batteries is,
batteries
amazingly different.
Batteries have all batteries. I like to say going all the way back to 1837 or something like that. Batteries have been a challenge. It's always seemed to be, that is almost the perpetual motion machine. You mean I get it moving, and when I slow down, I replenish it and to use it to speed up again. Let me get that efficiency to zero, and it's perpetual motion. Anybody who's ever been an innovator or whatever knows. That's Elon Musk 101 stuff. That's and of course, and geez, it's taken us 150 years to make some modest improvement in that with these lithium batteries that we seem to, and it's been tough.
And I think that's going to be a constraint on the future of the industry as well, isn't it? The just the kind of physical constraints on some of the supplies that are needed. Lithium clearly is a very difficult component to kind of stick into a battery. We obviously have a computer chip shortage around the world, which is massively affecting the auto industry. Kind of nickel, cobalt, and so on are also used in batteries, and that can supply constraints on those as well. So I think the EV revolution is happening, and it's happening really very fast now. But there are going to be things that are going to pull it back, I think, above and beyond the desirability of the cars themselves.
Yeah, there seems to be such an R&D push out there today when it comes to batteries that we didn't see before. There's an urgency to it now. Yeah,
and a huge amount of money is going into this. We were writing on Sifted the other day about this kind of Nordic battery company, Northvolt, which is trying to use hydrometallurgy to recycle a lot of batteries, and amazing kind of scale of operations that they're operating on. Their plant in kind of north, just south of the Arctic Circle, I think, is kind of covers the equivalent of about 100 football fields. Billions of dollars are going into this company. So you're seeing these enormous gigafactories emerging around the world to produce batteries, and when you get on that kind of scale of operation, it's quite kind of eye-opening.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good thing that, in fact, it shows the beginning of a maturity here, because at some point there gets to be such momentum behind this. you know, the madmen of Madison Avenue end up figuring out ways that, you know, we all go in there and pull the money out of our pockets and buy this and deal with the sociology. But I think bringing this back to the sociology, there's probably some significant money that deserves to go into the sociology of this thing. And I'm not sure who's going to do that, what's going to do that, how that's going to happen. But it'd be nice to have more than just a few dollars in that one, or pounds.
I guess the economists would also question whether this is a productive or an unproductive boom in terms of the kind of capital that is thrown at the market. I mean, as we have seen, you know, we have examples where a huge amount of capital gets thrown at a particular industry at a particular time. A huge amount of it is wasted. Everyone says it's a disaster. The whole market collapses. People lose a lot of money. And it's pretty much at that point that the real adoption of that technology then starts. And because it has laid the groundwork for railway networks or kind of telecoms networks, cable networks or whatever. So I think we're getting to that, almost at that point now in kind of the EV infrastructure, aren't we? I don't think it's there yet, but I think we'll soon be at the point that all of this kind of capital has gone into the market, and therefore will kind of spur the technological adoption, irrespective of what happens to the kind of speculative booms and busts.
Yeah, I
know, one. Go ahead, Alan.
Yep. Yeah, one of the things that just came to my mind associated with the EV thing, you know, the car, the conventional internal combustion engine, in terms of refilling the energy, you know, was basically real fast, boom, done, get out of here. And in fact, you know, what do you look at your typical filling station? It is, you know, there's no nice attribute associated with it. It's, you know, come in here, get your thing done, get the heck out of here, which is the way airports used to be before 9/11. Okay, why? Because we all ran like O.J. Simpson to get into that, you know, gate just as it was closed and get in that airplane, spent zero time in the airport, or at least the objective was to spend zero time in the airport. There were no restaurants, there was nothing or whatever. All of a sudden we had to go through the checkpoints, and you had to arrive 2 hours early, and you're sitting there. How did airports respond to that? I mean, they have really fine dining in there. They have all kinds of places that people reach down and try to take your money and do things for you. Now, maybe this is what happens around Tesla's charging places. You have to be there a half hour. Well, maybe now they'll focus on that half hour or whatever that you have to be there. And all of a sudden you're going to say, geez, I think I'll stay here for an hour or 2 hours. And what, I don't know what that ends up building on that, just to then get to the sociology part of this thing and take this range anxiety business out of all of our heads, and all of a sudden enjoy. I don't know, somebody's going to come up with that stuff. Go ahead, John.
It's interesting what you're saying, because we were driving in England the other weekend, back from the north of England where my in-laws live, and we had to stop off to recharge, and we didn't stop at a petrol station. We stopped at a Starbucks that by the side of the motorway. They had installed themselves all the kind of charging points. So I mean, it's Starbucks who are now running the kind of electricity charging points, which makes sense, because you know, if you have to stop for 45 minutes, then you go in and you eat. You know, there's no reason why, you know, it's the big kind of oil companies who run the petrol networks who are going to benefit from this.
And they charge you 10 pounds.
Refuel you while they're refueling.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and they charge you 10 pounds for a 10-cent cup of coffee, and you get to use the internet, whatever, and you buy. I mean, you know, they're not stupid, okay?
Well, there's one other news item we wanted to touch on with you, John, if we can. Here in the U.S., the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration this week ordered makers and operators of highly automated and partially automated vehicles to inform the agency of any serious crashes within a day and provide more complete data within a couple of weeks. Your thoughts?
I mean, I think the whole regulation of the autonomous car industry is going to develop very fast. And I mean, talking to people in this area, I think it's something that's now happening on an international level as well, isn't it? That we've had this kind of patchwork quilt of different regulations in different countries, and the car companies themselves, I think, want a more kind of standardized approach to what's going on if they're going to try to invest in technology. There's no point in complying with different operating systems, as it were, in different countries. And as I understand it, I mean, in the States, there are different regulations applying in different states, which means it's already difficult for cars to kind of cross state boundaries. I think there will be more kind of standardized regulation will happen, I assume, at the federal level in America, and it will probably at the international level as well. And I think that has to happen in order for the AV market to develop internationally. The car companies have to know by which standards and protocols they're going to be operating.
Yeah, but I think that with respect to this particular one, I think it's really good that NHTSA has finally come out there and said, look, when there are crashes, you've got to share your data. We're not going to compete on the safety end of this thing. We're going to cooperate on the safety end of this thing. And to me, the crashes and when it doesn't work is because we didn't know what we didn't know, not Rumsfeld, I guess, passed away, but not to use his quote, but whatever. Although he was Princeton, but anyway, that's another story. But no, really, we have to share that information, understand that in capitalist society, you can't have collusion and things like that, whatever. But we should be colluding on safety. We should be cooperating on safety. If this isn't safe, if this isn't safe, then that is the Hindenburg moment. It's not going to happen. Okay, forget about it. Take all your money out now, run for the hills, whatever, sweep it under the rug, do whatever you need to do. But we've got to compete. We've got to cooperate on safety. You've got to share the data. We have to say, okay, what happened? And let's fix it, as opposed to let's hide it and hope it doesn't happen again. No. And I think that's the important piece of this thing. And it's not just for the vehicles out there without a driver. It's for the Teslas too. It's for the Volvos too. It's for the Subarus that are out on the road now, that people are taking their hands off the wheel, feet off the pedals, relaxing, which is very good for them. But if these things crash, we should figure out why. Okay, and it has to be put out there, and I think this is as a nice of a thing to come out of a government in a very long time.
John was pointing out, Alan, the differences in the state regulations and the need for some federal action here. In Florida, for instance, a new law takes effect today, authored by Senator Jeff Brandes, who we know pretty well, authorizing the operation of low-speed autonomous delivery vehicles throughout the state. So the door is open.
Yeah, and they've done it, and I think that's one of the good things that Florida has done, because why? And the important thing in that legislation is it allows those low-speed vehicles to operate for short distances in places where the speed limit is substantially higher, especially when you have to, if you have a 25-mile-an-hour vehicle and there's a 45-mile-an-hour road you have to cross. It had been that you couldn't cross that 45-mile-an-hour road with your 25-mile-an-hour vehicle. And so, I mean, whatever, even if, the traffic light or whatever, and, some traffic engineer was out there, oh, no, you don't. So, that does a lot. And again, there are a lot of these sort of legislative initiatives that have to be put in a lot of places before we actually can this technology moves forward.
John, we wanted to ask you a bit for our audience. Tell us more about Sifted.eu.
Yes, yes.
Well, I took on a new job at the FT in kind of 2016, writing about kind of technology and the impact of technology. And I was going around the world, seeing what was going on the west coast of China and the west coast of the US and China. And I thought there was a really interesting kind of tech story taking place in our own backyard in Europe that no one was really capturing fully. I mean, clearly Europe has been a long way behind in terms of the kind of consumer internet and the tech revolution. But there was a lot of money going into tech startups. And as we are now seeing, some of these companies are becoming quite significant companies, clearly not on the scale that we're seeing in the West Coast of America or China, but there are now kind of unicorns, decacorns that are emerging on quite a big scale. And people are making a lot of money in this area now. There is a lot of kind of engineering talent in Europe. There is a lot of technological expertise. There is a lot of kind of money now looking to go into the tech startups. There's a lot of very good universities that are spawning great ideas. So there's a lot of the kind of compost needed to grow some really interesting companies. And that's really what we're writing about. So all across Europe, the UiPath, a robotics process automation company, kind of $35 billion valuation company, emerged out of Bucharest from nowhere. You've got kind of games companies developing out of Copenhagen. You've got kind of fintech companies in Amsterdam and Stockholm. So there are companies emerging all around Europe now that I think are becoming interesting kind of global companies. And it's fascinating to see how some of the US VCs, who I think have traditionally been quite kind of scornful about what's going on in Europe, people like Sequoia are now coming into Europe and beginning to invest and write some quite big checks to invest in these companies.
Any particular startups that excite you at the moment?
Well, I think the two areas that Europe has some kind of global traction on are kind of in the fintech area, and you're seeing that in London. Companies like kind of TransferWise or Klarna out of Sweden or Adyen out of the Netherlands. But also in the AI sector, I think you are getting a lot of kind of AI expertise coming out of the universities. DeepMind was obviously kind of brought up by Google, but you have a lot of AI startups trying to apply sometimes quite basic AI to different types of industries. And I think particularly in the healthcare sector, you're getting kind of a merger of AI expertise and healthcare, which are producing really interesting kind of medical research companies now. And also in your area of transport, you're getting companies, startups developing, offering different kinds of mobility solutions, particularly in scooters, like everywhere and around the world. There has been a kind of a big boomlet in kind of scooter investment, but also kind of delivery companies, on-demand food delivery, and also very rapid 10-minute grocery delivery services, which are emerging as well.
Yeah, I was going to comment. I guess we played in Europe, or I played in Europe for some time with respect to logistics in Europe, and really the logistics industry with respect to technological innovation and software and delivery and on-time delivery and all these sort of things to put it into really a code rather than is what some dispatcher's head and whatever. Absolutely, England was leading in it, and much better, my view is than in the U.S.
The website, once again, for more info is Sifted.eu, and people can also find you, John, at the Financial Times, ft.com. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
My pleasure. Great talking to you both.
John, a lot of fun. Thank you. I really appreciated it. Again, it's nice. It's nice that we don't know the answer. We're trying to ask the right question, and that's always very challenging.
Sure.
We want to thank our sponsor as well, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF. The ticker symbol for the ETF is MOTO. And more info can be found at motoetf.com. You can find us at smartdrivingcar.com, also on Anchor FM, Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Google, Spreaker, wherever you turn to for podcasts. You can get your smart speaker to play us too if you choose. And you can find my tech reports at techstination.com. I'm Fred Fishkin along with Alain Kornhauser. Thank you for listening or watching, and please continue to stay safe.
Thank you. I won't say happy July 4th because, of course, John, you don't celebrate July 4th, right?
Not so much.
Not so much,
reason.
right? But hey, I guess good luck against Ukraine, and
Thank you very much. All right. Good to talk to you both.
Nice.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.